Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm about to connect Lauren Clay here with us for our continuing artist conversation. So please bear with me. All right, we're about to get Lauren on the line. Hi.
Hi.
So, hi, Lauren Clay.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Okay, this is a little different. This is our third in a series of artist conversations that we started at Cris Worley Fine Arts, sort of in response to being quarantined and not having access to the art like we normally would. And it's actually turned out to be something that may end up going forward because it's just such a great way to reach people and to get to hear our artists' voices. And so today we're talking with Lauren Clay. Lauren, where are you coming from today?
I'm at my studio in Brooklyn, in the Bushwick neighborhood of Brooklyn. Can you hear me okay?
You're breaking up a little bit, but what might end up happening is that it'll settle in just a few minutes. I've noticed that that's happened before, but you're in your Brooklyn studio, right?
Yeah. Yeah, studio. It's just like a short walk to my apartment, so it's pretty easy for me to get here.
Yeah, right. Without having to come in contact with others.
Yeah.
That's good. I also wanted to mention to our viewers that along with this series, so now we have the Instagram IGTV component to our Instagram account, but we also will be posting all of our videos. So we record these, and all of the videos get then posted to our new YouTube account. So if you know others that might be interested in learning more about the artists, or if you just want to watch it again, then please Google us, or just go to YouTube and look up Cris Worley Fine Arts. And after this one, we'll have 3 up. So just wanted to be sure to mention that. Now, I am actually in the gallery today. We are opening things up a little bit here in Texas, and we are also now able to meet with clients by appointment. We're practicing CDC guidelines for sterilization, wearing face masks, and practicing social distancing. Typically, there will only be one person here working at a time, and also to protect our staff. But we are really excited to be able to invite people back to the gallery to see the shows in person, because as wonderful as this is to view work online, it's even more rewarding to see the work in person. So it's nice, Lauren, that we can do this today as a way for people to see what is on view, and then those who are in the area can actually come down, can make an appointment and come down and view it. And I'm going to stop talking in just a second, but I'm going to say this. So this show actually opened in February, and we had intended to keep it up for a good while because it is quite an involved installation, and we're going to pull back so you can see more of the room, but also I'm going to be sharing images from my phone of it as well. In fact, let me do that now.
Oh, cool.
This is our viewing room. And the viewing room is typically an area where we pull works for clients and collectors who are interested in seeing what we have at the gallery. But we decided that it was also a great, just in a way, a space that we could introduce visiting artists to show. And Lauren is our inaugural artist for a series, a continued series that we have launched called Tales from the Viewing Room. And Lauren has just kicked it off in the most dynamic, explosive, incredibly immersive possible way. And so we're going to keep it up longer than was intended, because this really should be something to be experienced in person. Lauren, I would love it if you would tell our audience a little bit about how you create a room like this, like nuts and bolts. How do you go from here to what we're seeing on the walls? Because we're seeing both two-dimensional and three-dimensional works here in the room.
Sure. Usually when I start an installation, I'll start by really studying the space. And I spend a lot of time thinking about the architecture of the space, even if it's just a simple box. Like most galleries are just like a simple square box, but sometimes there are small details or vantage points that I spend a lot of time thinking about. And I'll start by making a model. So when I first, since I didn't do a site visit for this installation, I started by making a model and using like the floor plan. So I'll spend a lot of time studying and then using that model, start to draw inside the model. So thinking about ways to manipulate the space, or ways I would like to manipulate the space. And often at the same time, I'll have sculptures that I'm working on. And I think a lot about how I would like to integrate the sculptures into the installation. So I'll start playing with ideas inside the model and like using it as like a three-dimensional drawing. So then I'll eventually, when I get to a point where I'm starting to feel more comfortable, I'll start making drawings digitally. And meaning sort of the way an architect works, like using elevations, like a flat diagram of the walls to like draw and to plan. So I really go back and forth between like drawing and drawing digitally, and then also the model. But I use the model, I like depend on the model a lot to make decisions about an installation. So yeah, I have the model beside me, but I don't know how much you'll be able to see if I show you.
Can you show us the model? It's really cool.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
1 second. I'm just gonna.
So you're about to show us the model that you created for this room that I'm in now.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, you have to keep in mind this is the final version of the model. So it basically looks like the room, but it's basically like a foam core model, like with the walls proportionate to real life. Then, so it's basically like the room you're sitting in is just the final version of that installation. So, but I spent a lot of time like drawing and then looking at different vantage points from within the model to plan. So.
Okay. But now, so there's a lot going on in here, right? Mm-hmm. I want to try to find an image. So the walls are covered in vinyl.
Yeah.
But the images that are printed on the vinyl begin how?
So when I get to a point where I feel confident, like about the installation, like what I'd like to achieve with the installation, I'll make a collage. So I've been marbling paper for a long time. Like I've been using it for collages, like for making works on paper. But I started making these collages that I then enlarge to the scale of the wall and then print digitally so that the collage is like enlarged to life size.
Okay, so I always feel like it's really good to some people don't know what marbling paper is.
Sure. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, you start off with little pieces of paper that you do a print on, a monotype type print, a one of one print by marbling the paper. And you do that how does one marble?
It's a traditional technique. It's been used for, I don't know how long, maybe 1,000 years. But basically, you have a bath of liquid, like a tray almost, with inks or paint like floating on the surface of that liquid, and then you can manipulate the paint so that it there is some control, but there's also an element of chance left to it, and then you can basically you capture what's floating on the surface by laying down a sheet of paper and then removing it. So then what you're left with is a print. It's almost like making a monoprint, like you said.
Yeah.
But the different thing is that, because you're printing using a liquid, the print actually captures all of the like undulations and like ripples in the surface of the liquid. So the marble paper ends up feeling very like dimensional and physical. There's like a lot of optical effects that happen. So
Right.
I think that's one interesting thing, and also manipulate, like going back and forth between using marbled paper that has these sort of spatial distortions and then using it to create spatial distortions like in an installation is something that I find really interesting. So
I think one of the things that you and I had talked about when you were here was really appreciating, there is very much a digital component to the final product, if you will, of this work, but that it really is derived from the hand initially.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that you have an appreciation for that way of working.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the like tangible, like physical object. And even though I'm digitally printing, the detail in the print I feel like replicates the physical object so much more. Like it magnifies the physicality of like those collages, so that all of the details, like the texture of the paper or small cuts in the paper, show up in the enlarged like vinyl installation. So I know there's sort of like it's a digital process in some ways, but it's also has like a very physical element to it to me. Yeah, so that does really interest me.
One thing, I don't know if I'm going to be able to show this, but I'm going to try, because the marbling effect on the wall is actually very, it probably doesn't read very well, but it's very velvety. Most people don't realize that it is vinyl at all. And that is something that you've worked very hard at achieving. None of this stuff is really by chance. I mean, you've really, you've made a lot of specific decisions about the look and feel of the overall look and feel of things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, through trial and error, that, yeah, I think what you mean, like when you like look up close to the image, like to the printed image, like you see all the texture and tooth of the paper that you wouldn't normally see. So, yeah.
Right, because it's blown up, but people actually have asked me if it's felt.
Yeah, I get that question a lot. Yeah.
So it does have, it has a lot of tactile, like a tactile experience, as well as just sort of an immersive environmental experience. It has a tactile experience as well.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it's important for me that it has that element because also its relationships to the sculptures. Like the sculptures are, because they're like relief sculptures and have a lot of texture and detail, like I want them to feel of the same world almost. So, yeah.
And so can you tell us a little bit about the sculptures then too? Because in a way you have two different bodies of work that are that have come together in an installation here, but they are also individually their own sort of separate parts of your practice. In other words, for a collector, for instance, the installation, just the wall, just the digital marbled portion is something that could be collected, or just the sculptures could be collected, or the two combined in an overall installation can be acquired. So tell us about the sculptures, because I've gotten a lot of really fun, before we closed, I got a lot of really fun, when I closed temporarily, a lot of fun comments about the sculptures. People ask what they are. They really want to know what they're made of, because there's something very kind of, they're very quirky, and you can't quite figure out what they are, what they're supposed to be, what they're made of. So there's all these questions, that come up about the work, which is great because, they're very engaging.
That's cool. Thanks. Yeah, it's funny that to me, they are like, to me, it's all like the same body of work in some degrees, but there's a lot of crossover. Like when I'm drawing image, like I'm thinking of drawings for installations and sculptures simultaneously, and like how they can integrate. But yeah, the sculptures, they've evolved a lot over time. They're like low relief sculptures, and I guess I can just give a little background info, like how they're actually made. But they basically have a shaped panel support, like the same way you would make like a painting, a shaped painting or on panel but so it's shaped in the form, like I work a lot on drawings for the sculptures, and then I'll eventually use like a full scale drawing to make a template. And so they have a panel with a cleat on the back, and then I'll spend a long time like manipulating the surface by like carving foam. So there's an armature of foam underneath, and then I'll spend a long time like building up the forms using it's a mixture of paper pulp and plaster. So they're actually like very like hand built, like hand manipulated,
and then hand painted.
Yeah, and hand painted. Yeah, so that I finish them like by painting them the same way you would make a painting, like gessoing and oil painting.
Mm-hmm.
So
now, one thing we haven't talked about is the title of the installation, While Sleeping Watch, which is slightly, I don't want to say menacing, but it definitely is a curious title. And so I wondered if you could tell us just a minute about the origins of that.
Sure, yeah. So, I've always been very interested in architecture, and over the past like couple of years, especially, I've had a lot of dreams of like wandering around like spaces, like different types of like buildings or secret passageways, or and my boyfriend and I are actually like both really interested in the archetypal symbols, and he especially has been really studying Jung a lot, and I think I've become interested in the way these sort of, my work has always referenced architecture to some degree, but these forms like how they represent different aspects of the psyche, and how they can represent different sort of unknown parts of ourselves, which is part of dreaming. Like you are your psyche is like showing you these aspects of yourself that you might not be fully aware of. That was something that Jung taught. And so the title is actually a reference to a specific engraving, and like
I have that here.
Cool. Yeah. It's a reference to like an alchemical saying or phrase, while sleeping watch, meaning even though you may be dreaming, you should be paying attention, and like the deeper meaning like might be within. I'm not an alchemist, and I'm super interested in alchemy, but I will be honest in saying that I don't know a ton about alchemy. But yeah, I love this engraving, and I sort of discovered it early on in planning this installation. And I think it's interesting the way that the drawing uses all of these. It's a circle, but the drawing uses all of these perspective lines. And at the center of the drawing is the alchemist's bedroom. And above the doorway, it says Dormiens Vigila, which I'm probably mispronouncing, but in Latin, I think means while sleeping watch, or right. Yeah. I think there's that there. Yeah. Or awake in sleep. It can also mean that also. Awake in sleep.
And I wish my image wasn't over the other side, because you really do get that sense of the three walls, the perspective down into the corridor, and it really feels like this room in a lot of ways. So yeah. I love that you use that as a reference, but had your spin on it.
Yeah, I think I just I like the idea of the central point of the laboratory being the bedroom, like the alchemist bedroom. I love that, and I feel like it's a good allegory in some ways to being an artist, and like the sort of like discovering the unknown.
I'm trying to read the name here, but you have a question that's come up. Do you see these forms in your dreams?
I love that question. I mean, sort of, like in some ways, sure, yeah. I've definitely had a lot of dreams with stairways or hidden doors with like secret ladders that I didn't know existed in my house, or like in my grandparents' house, like. And I think they definitely have like influenced like my work. And I mean, also like whenever, I think like any other artist, like when I close my eyes, I just start thinking about my own work, which is very selfish and self-absorbed, but it's just a truth.
I'm showing images from other installations now as you talk about space and talking about secret passages in your grandparents' house. Actually made me think about a question that I wanted to ask you, because you and I are both from the Deep South. And I don't know what your grandparents' house was like, but I spent a lot of time in some extremely old houses with old house smells and old house nooks and crannies and just strange architectural spaces, but like spaces being very impactful on my memory of those places.
Oh yeah, totally.
Along with those smells, 200-year-old smells.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you felt like there was any, and so you did touch on that, if there was any kind of, if you felt like being raised, in the Atlanta area has any kind of impact on your art, either the way it looks or the way you approach it.
Yeah, totally. Atlanta is and where I grew up in the suburbs of Atlanta, and it's very similar to most suburbs in the U.S., like sort of homogenized pseudo-classical architecture, stucco, lots of, But I went to undergrad college in Savannah. I went to Savannah College of Art, and so like I think that experience of spending so much time in Savannah, which is such a unique city, and has such like an authentic sense of like placeness or like sight. Like I think that totally influenced me. Definitely.
Well, that's interesting you say that too, because you have this kind of neoclassicism or, you know, architecture very much plays a role, and even the marbling, right? So neoclassicism in the architecture, arches and columns and these kinds of structures, but then also, you know, marbling like you know, see in, you know,
Yeah.
Italianate columns and so forth. So there is I mean, this work is very fresh. I cannot emphasize enough to our viewers, and I hope that you'll be able to come down and see just how fresh and special this work really is. But it does draw on a lot of historical references.
Yeah.
The etching you could see was a very clear example of that, but also just you know, the architecture that you choose to, you know, you're not using austere, you know, postmodern kind of architecture. You're working with old.
Yeah. I I feel like I look at like more ancient architecture and like
Huh?
ancient art than I do like contemporary art sometimes. I mean, we live in New York, so we go to tons when things are open. We go to tons of openings and see so much work, and I like love so many of my friends' work. But like when it comes to influences, yeah, I look at so much ancient architecture and decorative arts. I've always loved.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's something about you know, modernism, like it references classical architecture, but they really stripped out all of the decorative elements.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like it's sort of decoration is like not very like highly esteemed, but I think there's some in so much decorative art, like decorative elements in architecture. There's like um, so many symbols and like archetypal symbols that I think are like important and interesting. And I don't know. Yeah.
So in that way, in that line of thinking, do you see these sculptures as almost human? Are they more like figures, or are they more like energy, or what are they to you?
um, it's funny. They've gone through different states, but I almost usually think of them as like characters,
Mm-hmm.
like sort of characters in this space. I mean, most of the sculptures are symmetrical, and I mean, in like really basic way, I think they like reference the body, and a lot of the forms are they have the same like proportions and uh, feeling of like a limb or a roll of fat or an arm or leg or so. I mean, to me, they feel like the body, but there's often architectural elements like embedded in the sculptures, and I think it sort of goes back to that idea of like discovering these like internal spaces or spaces that reference different aspects of our psyche. Like it sounds really pretentious, but that's how I think of it. Like windows, like I use a lot of windows in recent sculptures, like over the past couple of years, or stairs. So yeah.
So for me personally, I'll just say that they feel very much like when I imagine what energy centers in our bodies are emanating,
Mm-hmm.
kind of coming from this central, like you said, they're very symmetrical, kind of coming from
Yeah.
the central area, and then sort of resonating outward. I see them like, even, you know, you think about the chakras or something like that, maybe sort of
Yeah. Totally.
referring to different energy centers.
Yeah, totally. I've studied I studied yoga like a lot, and especially in the past, and like that idea of like the like chakra maps. Like I don't know if you've ever seen those
Yes,
drawings,
exactly. Yes.
chakra maps. Yeah, like from you know like ancient drawings. Like I'm talking about where they like map out different parts of the body and all these like energy lines running through the body. That is super interesting to me. Yeah. Totally.
So what is your ultimate um, when you're making work, or when you're making, let's say, an installation like this, what do you hope to achieve? Like, that's kind of a tough question to answer, but
Yeah.
I mean, what do you want to transmit? What do you want to give? What do you hope to have the experience be?
Um, that's a hard question.
That is a hard question.
Um, I mean, I think I'm usually trying to there's something just very self-driven, like this compulsion to make something that I want to see. And that's I know that's really basic, but the installations are so big, and it's always such a great experience to be able to make something that you can um, experience for the first time yourself. It's when I'm even though I'm the artist, I'm still experiencing it in real life for the first time, when I do these installations. So it's usually something that I want to experience. So sometimes that means I just want to manipulate the space a certain way and see what it feels like. Or I mean, I think there's definitely an element of escapism and wanting to create these worlds, or just sort of draw back the curtain to this world that I feel or sense that it exists. So
That is awesome. So you have another question. How important is scale relative to the viewer or human form to you?
Super important. Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot about when I make the models, especially when I'm planning an installation, I'll always have a figure in there, the human scale. And I definitely want there to be an element of illusion, when I'm making the installation. So it has to relate to our bodies, in some way, for that to happen.
Yeah.
Usually, I mean, I love making things that are huge, things that I feel dwarfed by.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just something about that, creating that feeling of discovering something, or yeah, I don't know if that's
maybe
sense.
The feeling of being overwhelmed by something.
Yeah,
you can't ignore it because it is overwhelming you. It is overwhelming your senses.
Yeah.
Big impact.
Yeah.
I see that, and you absolutely have achieved that here. And I cannot emphasize enough how when people round the corner and they experience this, just they are in awe, as Makeup Bista #1 has said here, in awe. It is awe inspiring, and I do think that you achieved that. So you should feel a lot of satisfaction. You are on an incredible path. And folks, those of you who have been watching today, I hope that you will be able to make an appointment to come by and see. And if you don't live in the area, we'd be happy to share images with you. Again, this video will be available to watch on our Instagram TV, IGTV channel, and our YouTube channel. And Lauren, I hope that you will be able to come back, once all of this is cleared, and visit with us again. Our visit in Dallas was incredible, and you really are making a huge impact with this work. And we are just so incredibly proud and excited to have had it here.
Thank you so much.
And this is extended. We do not have a clear end yet because we're adapting like everybody is right now. But this work is available to see at least through the end of the month, folks, and probably longer. So if you would like to make an appointment to come by and be overwhelmed by an incredible visual experience, please do so. Lauren, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and visiting us from Brooklyn. I hope that you all are well and safe, and yeah.
Yeah, same to you. Thank you for having me. It's fun.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. I hope that you all have a great Saturday. Happy Memorial Day. And we'll see you next time here.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.